Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Thanks, Jason. Parshat Naso, from the book of Numbers, is our Torah portion for this week. And for the most part, this Torah portion consists primarily about the concluding census requirements and the practices of the Nazarite vow. But I think there's one thing especially in particular that we're going to talk about that really captures the past 11 days from this Torah portion. And this is the instruction that Moses gave to Emanu-El, the Jewish people, that if one person wrongs another, we have to go through the importance of owning up to it, the confession, the vidui, the teshuvah, the repentance, and making amends, the restitution. Because I always say in the human condition, it's certainly difficult to own up to our own shortcomings, our own humanities. And that's why on Rosh Hashanah, and especially on Yom Kippur, we go through this rigorous confession process through the vidui Rabbi, the great confession. And there's one confession that I want to speak to. And it goes like this because it will sound familiar. Al chet shachatanu lefanecha be'emutz halev. Again, al chet shachatanu lefanecha be'emutz halev. For the ways that we have wronged you by hardening our hearts. It's not just the Pharaoh whose heart was hardened during the Exodus. It happens to us too. And the way that I define the Emutz Halev, the hardening of our hearts, it's when apathy, complacency, silence, disinterest, judgment, and especially individualism dominate and harden our hearts. And I think these past 11 days has been a result of the hardening of hearts through the years. And we see so many people responding to the apathy, to the lack of listening, the complacency, and especially the individualism. Now, I want to be clear. I always believe in the responsibility of this position and the responsibility of Shabbat when I have the opportunity to offer my remarks. And I will not allow the Kedusha, the holiness, to interpret, to analyze, to justify, or even process the looting, the vandalism, the violence that has completely destroyed the crux, the heart of these protests, and the cries from our community and country. And I want us all to remember David Dorn, who was murdered. He was a retired African-American police officer, age 77, who was murdered protecting his friend's store. And this is a name that I also want us to keep in our hearts too as well. I can't justify the looting and the violence, as it's not only destroying businesses, but as I'll get to later, this violence is vandalizing synagogues and kosher restaurants, especially in Los Angeles. And we're seeing a bevy of hateful anti-Semitic tropes. And therefore, I don't want to justify anything that will bring fuel to the fire. But I do want to take tonight, on Shabbat, to take this moment and process what we're experiencing together. I want to process on what we should do next, because we need to do something tangible. And I want to discuss this internally and inward, the same thing that we do on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I want to talk about how we can stop or prevent or limit the hardening of hearts. Because I want to stop the complacency. I want to stop the silence and especially the apathy. So we can respond with action and provide justice with a lasting effect. Because that is our obligation as a sacred community to all of our community. This past Sunday, civic and faith leaders spoke at Kelly Ingram Park for the important and crucial rally to mourn the life of George Floyd and countless African Americans who died from judicial killings. The protests also focused on police harassment, the judicial system, and after all, protesting is the greatest form of freedom which should be celebrated. I was there representing our Temple family. I stood at the pavilion at the park, waiting for my time to speak. And I listened to the passion of the speakers. I saw the sea of people that represented different races and ages, with their clear and cogent signs, poster boards, and t-shirts. Signs that protested the injustice, signs that protested police brutality and police profiling, signs that protested poverty, and so many signs that addressed collective silence. There was passion, there was a demand for justice. We could feel it. And as I stood at this podium, awaiting my turn, I suddenly realized that I've been at Kelly Ingram Park before. And all of a sudden, I remembered these moments like it was yesterday. February 2012, December 2015, and December 2017. And each time we were at Kelly Ingram Park, we walked the sidewalks with Bishop Calvin Woods, an iconic Birmingham civil rights leader who actually has a sign in that park that speaks to his service. I took a bunch of teens from California who live in a similar bubble, and they got some empathy that day. They sang songs of redemption, songs of freedom. We clapped, we hugged, and this solidified, strengthened the trip in our response. And I have no doubt that these teens won't forget this moment. And I've been here a year. I am surprised and a bit disappointed in myself that I haven't taken the time earlier to walk around in Kelly Ingram Park, to see the statutes, to listen, to process, to reflect and to understand the seriousness of this position, and to remember that we are obligated to answer the call to lift people out of oppression and to respond to injustice. And after all, Birmingham is the home of the civil rights movement. It's been a long year. It's been a long year for everybody, especially in March. And sometimes part of the human condition, our life story, gets in the way. We become forgetful to what's going around. We're focused on our lives, our children, our occupations, extracurricular activities, getting kids into college. Life hits us and we can't be focused on everything. And this is part of what happens to be human, but on the other hand, to reflect. But we can't allow this type of forgetfulness, the passivity, the individualism, the apathy. We can't allow it to linger on. And this is the heart of the problem. When we partake in a cause, often we drop it because life gets in our way and there's something else to do. And therefore, to make a real change, to end this terrible disease that must be greater than a quick social media post on Tuesday on Facebook or Instagram, or showing our solidarity with the hashtag. Hashtag won't lift people from injustice and from oppression. To make a real change, we need to look inward, like in the high holidays. We need to evaluate how we as a Jewish community haven't stepped up enough to even eradicate the systematic and mainstream anti-Semitism, because our apathy, silence, is present here with us too. And we have a community in need. And we can't be our best selves for our community when we have forgotten so much about what's going on with us and our lack of response. And let me give you some examples. The Jewish people in this country remain the #1 targeted group of hate crimes. I haven't seen the outrage. I haven't seen corporations make statements, but I haven't heard from so many of us. There are 2,100 incidences in the United States, which was the greatest jump this past year. Where is our protest for justice? 20% of the British people believe that Jews or Muslims are responsible for COVID-19. Again, silence, silence. Anti-Semitic incidents has doubled in the Czech Republic. In its annual report, the Federation of Jewish Communities there said there were 694 attacks compared to 347 in the previous year. Attacks against Jews are up 13% in Germany, and in Belgium, where they have arguably the most grotesque, disgusting annual anti-Semitic parade, they just removed the police from guarding synagogues. Jewish stores, anti-Semitic graffiti in Los Angeles during the looting. I haven't heard from our Jewish organizations. Where is the teshuvah? Where is the justice for the store owners? Recently, there was a synagogue in Montreal where someone broke in and took talit and stuffed it in toilets, and then they took the Torah scrolls and cut it up. This past year, we have seen countless attacks against the Hasidic community in Brooklyn. Again, where were our voices? Have we done enough to protect our college students? And here's a name that I always want us to remember. Joseph Newman of blessed memory, who succumbed to his wounds in late March. And who was Joseph? He was a victim from the Hanukkah attack in Monsey, New York. Silence, apathy, no passion, no protest for his justice. And therefore, I wonder, how are we remembering Lori Kay, who was murdered in Poway last year? How are we remembering the 11 Jews murdered in Pittsburgh? What are we doing to protest the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism? And therefore, I ask again, what can we do for another community who is in desperate need for justice and for liberation, when we have such difficulty doing justice for our people? For the ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts. Apathy, silence, disinterest, judgment, individualism, and complacency. But like in the high holidays, we always get the process. We process and then we get to make a pivot to make a difference for our lives and for others. We always get a second chance and make a difference. But sometimes we need to be reminded. The great poet of the early 20th century, Bialik, wrote a poem called The City on the Slaughter. He wrote this poem to speak to the devastation left in the wake of the Kishinev pogrom in 1903. He needed the international Jewish community to wake up and see what is going on. And he wrote, "Arise," the same imagery when God spoke to Abraham. "Get up, arise, and go now to the city of slaughter. Into its courtyard wend thy way. There with thine hand touch, and with the eyes of my head. Behold on the tree, on stone, on fence, on Mirokeh, the spattered blood of those who were murdered." It's our time to arise. For us and for the African American community. It's our time to soften our hearts and return to empathy, putting aside individualism, putting aside social media, and embracing volunteerism. It's about having a conversation with our family and friends about the state of our people and our city. Perhaps our need for extracurricular activities, sports won't dominate our lives. It's about a new direction for our priorities that can make a difference. This is advocacy, and this is how we make a difference. I'm confident that in a couple of weeks, these protests will come to an end, and this is part of the American phenomenon. And with it, sensational and simplistic social media campaigns and platitudes, those too will come to an end. But the issue will remain, What is next? What is next that we can do to alleviate the pain in our community? How can we lobby to discuss ending qualified immunity within law enforcement and governmental officials? How can we mobilize to advance and improve educational, technology, and opportunities for the African American community? And what can we do as a Jewish community to fight for prison reform in this state? How can we get our feet wet, get in the game, to end mass incarceration and excessive punishment? There are opportunities for change, and we can do a real prescription here. But it takes remembrance, it takes passion, and it takes time. And therefore, I want to give us some action items. Our Director of Education, Linda Gutchen, and I have began to brainstorm to adapt our educational endeavors to make sure that we can engage with the city of Birmingham with our teams. Our Social Action Committee will begin to engage in even more advocacy within our city. And I'm proud to say tonight, we have solidified our partnership with Faith in Action Alabama. In August, we will partake in research actions that discuss the policing in our area. And then Faith in Action Alabama and Temple Emanu-El, we will partake in a comprehensive, nonpartisan voting engagement process with the minority community to get them into the voter's box. It's our goal to have a 12-person team for 3 months, and I'm going to call on you to join us as other 39 congregations will be part of this. And we will also pursue voter rights restoration for those who are incarcerated. We have this opportunity to affect change, and you'll hear more from us, and we want to give you every opportunity to partake in it. We have an obligation. We have our work to end this plague in our community. Parshat Naso ends with something powerful and something meaningful and always with hope. And on Shabbat, we should always think of hope for the Jewish people and the greater community. And it ends with a blessing that's been with our people through thousands of years. And these are the words that Aaron gave to the people of Israel, especially during their uncertainty and darkest hour. And allow these words from Parshat Naso to lift us all up, to give us the courage, to give hope to everyone in need who are fighting for injustice. And the blessing goes as the following, because it will sound familiar. May God bless you and forever protect you. May God's face forever shine upon you and be gracious to you. And once more, when we are facing our darkest hour, may God's face forever lift us up and forever bring us peace. Shabbat Shalom.